All set, madam.
Yes, okay, fine, very good.
Are you going to show some slides?
Krishna, no, I don't think so.
Okay, okay. Good for all.
Krishna Paniji is also here. Okay,
Hello.
good. Hi.
Yeah. Yes. I got it.
Okay. So we'll start at
Recording showing that into close it.
why is it there?
What, madam? No. Recording is in progress.
Hi, Dina. Busy? You're busy? Can't hear you.
Meena,
Namaskar, sir.
Meena, can you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you do the school prayer, please? Because Malti is not here today.
Yeah. I'll
Huh?
mute myself. I'll mute.
No, you have to do the school prayer.
No, no. Am I muted?
You're
No,
not
we are
muted.
able to hear you. You are audible.
How do I mute? This new app is I'm not familiar with.
Okay,
No,
so on your screen,
you are
So please
visible
mute
and
me. I don't know
audible.
how to do it. Ah,
You are both visible and audible.
Yeah. Loud and clear.
Yeah.
good, good, good. But I'm not able to mute. How do I do it?
There's an icon below.
Yeah, it's
Mic is there. You just press on it. It becomes mute. The leftmost corner icon in the center, you will see about 7 icons. Yeah, you are muted now.
thank you. So who else is there? Gulu? Gulu? Gulu, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Malati is not here. can I request you to do Om Bhur Bhuva? Can I request you to
Don't
guys,
know
you
that
want
one.
to do?
No problem.
I can do Asatoma.
You want the Om Bhur Bhuva to be done?
Yes.
I'll do it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, all right. So then after Meena, then if you can do that, please. Krishna Paniji, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, okay, Gulu, no problem. All right, are we all here? It's nearly 5:01. We should start in another 4 minutes. We'll start. Someone is here. If you can do the chanting.
I've unmuted you, Meena. I've
Oh, me?
unmuted you. No. School prayer. Who's going to say the school prayer?
Is Ram there? Are you going to do it?
Huh?
Is Ram there?
He's there. He's resting.
Or Ravi, you yourself
Ravi, you
can
do
do
it. No. Ravi, you
I'll
do
do
it. Okay. Meena, then you do Loka Samasta at the end, okay? Meena,
Yeah.
you do Loka
Yeah, I'll do.
Samasta at the end.
Okay.
I don't know where Sajini is. I can't see Sajini that way.
Yeah, I'll say the prayer. O Eden
Okay,
life,
so-
vibrant in every atom. O Eden light, shining in every creature. O Eden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other.
Thank you, Ravi. Can we first have everybody mute?
I'll mute
Can we have
them.
everybody muted, please? There's too much ambient noise. Yeah, okay. Please mute yourself and stay muted. Thank you. Krishna Paniji, can you do
Om Bhur Om Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat Om Bhur Om Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat Om Bhur Om Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat Om Shanti
Asato Sadgamaya Amaso Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti. So just a warm welcome to everybody. Today it's, I think we have some people who have joined us. So I'm just going to tell you what this progressive group is all about. We used to meet every Tuesday at Ma Manise's place at Rest House Road to read a book that was from her list. She had given us a list of books that we were reading. And the book that we are presently reading is Bhagavad Gita from In the Light of Sri Aurobindo. So that's what we've started already. you have joined us now. We are in the 9th chapter, but it makes no difference. This is the kind of book that one needs to read several times in one's lifetime. So this is we are on 9th chapter, and we are going to be doing shloka 15 and 16. So our normal method of doing this is that Suman is here with us. She's going to chant the shloka, and then after she chants the shloka, then I will read from Sri Aurobindo's book. I will read the translation, and I will also read his commentary on it. After which, Sri Krishnapani ji will explain to us what the depth of the shloka is. And this is actually a much nicer way to do it, because then we get the expertise of Sri Krishnapani ji, and he explains to us in great detail and beyond what just the shloka is, and he explains it to us in the context of the all the scriptures that we have. So it's a very interesting session, and we do only about 2 or 3 maximum shlokas at a time, because we want to do it really well. So please stay tuned to us. And every Tuesday we meet at 5 o'clock at this time. Between 5 and 6 is our session. And I will post on the school group, I will be posting which shlokas we'll be doing for the next week. We would require you to actually read the shlokas in advance and read some sort of commentary on it before you come, so that you're sort of prepared. We do have a question and answer at the end of the session, so you can ask questions, and Krishnapani ji will be very happy to explain to you anything that you want explained in more detail. So thank you all for being here once again. Can I request Suman ji to chant the 15 shloka? Krishnapani ji, that's okay? I think you're on mute, Krishnapani ji. You're on mute.
Okay. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, can hear you. Yeah. Okay, so Suman?
I'll start, Veena ji.
Yes, please.
I have also the Aurobindo book. If you want, I can read it from that. And you can read the if you.
Sorry, you have the book?
I have Aurobindo's version.
Perfect. Okay, then read the commentary as well.
But Sumanji, there is some your voice is not very audible.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, I think it's better now. Move closer to the system. Are you in the laptop, or is it your phone?
My phone.
Phone. The signal will be slightly weak, and the bandwidth will also be less.
I'll switch off my.
Yeah.
Then maybe you should chant, and then I can do the.
Yes.
Huh? Okay, Suman?
Yeah. See.
Okay.
Okay, see.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead.
यान यज्ञेन चाप्यन्ये यजन्तो मापुपासते एकत्वेन पृथक्त्वेन बहुधा विश्वतो मुखम्. Others too engage in jnana yajna, sacrifice of knowledge, and to me the all pleasing in various ways to oneness through diversity. Those who lay a predominant stress on knowledge arrive to the same point by an always increasing
Suman,
engrossing.
I'm sorry. Suman?
Yeah.
Suman?
Yes.
There's too much disturbance. I don't know where it's coming from.
Okay, then you continue.
I'll read this part then. Okay? Krishnapani ji, you're muted again.
Others can, all of us can mute ourselves. And you can on your own this thing, Veena ji, and read the commentary.
Okay, fine. All right, okay. Others too, engaged in jnana yajna, sacrifice of knowledge, get unto me the all-facing in various ways, through oneness, through diversity. Those who lay a predominant stress on knowledge arrive to the same point by an always increasing, engrossing, enforcing power of the vision of the divine on the soul and the nature. Theirs is the sacrifice of knowledge. It is not a pursuit of the supreme merely as an abstract unity or an indeterminable absolute. It is a heartfelt seeking and seizing of the supreme and the universal, a pursuit of the infinite in his infinity and of the infinite in all that is finite, a vision and embracing of the one in his oneness and of the one in all of his several principles, his innumerable visages, forces, forms, here, there, everywhere, timelessly, and in time multitudinously in endless aspects of his Godhead, in being without number, all his million universal faces fronting us in the world and its creatures, ekatvena, पृथक् बहुधा विश्व मुखम विश्वतो मुखम. Krishnapani ji?
Yeah. See, this is a continuation of the elaboration of Bhagavan Sri Krishna to Arjuna about the royal mystery, Rajaguhya. This is the chapter is called as Rajavidya and Rajaguhya Yoga. According to Adi Shankara, this shloka is interpreted as though speaking of three classes of persons who worship. The important aspect here is it's a jnana yajna. And that's what very clearly Aurobindo explains, that there is a predominant stress on jnana here. The stress is more on jnana, but as he mentions, they arrive to the same point by always increasing, engrossing, enforcing power of the vision of the divine. That is what is very clearly happening here. Okay. So, one needs to understand that the sacrifice of knowledge is what is being referred to here. And Aurobindo says that of those who have sacrificed this knowledge, by an ineffable ecstasy of knowledge, they come to the adoration of the Purushottama. In the sense, as I mentioned earlier in one of our discussions, see, sacrifice here means making it sacred. That is the point to be remembered. It's a question of making something sacred. So, knowledge becomes sacred, or we can term is that jnana is that wisdom which has to be made sacred through the deeper understanding of the reality and come to that state of ecstasy, come to that state of transcendence where it leads to the adoration of the Purushottama. Aurobindo, in a different context, gives a lot of elaboration on this term Purushottama. We can't go into that now, but if you read the essays on the Bhagavad Gita and the commentary he has written on the Bhagavad Gita, he gives that special emphasis to this term called Purushottama. That is what is important. Okay. So here, through Jnana Yajna, it is leading you to bhakti. That is the adoration of the Purushottama he is talking about. And here, another aspect that he brings into focus is that Jnana Yajna, or if you are following what is given in the Upanishads as the Brahman, which is for all practical purposes, from the level of consciousness at which we are functioning, it is something which is abstract. It is something which is indeterminable and absolute. That point, Aurobindo wants to clarify very much and say it is not a pursuit of the Supreme merely as an abstract unity or an indeterminable absolute. It's not that exactly. It is the reality, that supreme intelligence, which assumes a personification, which is seen as the Purushottama. That is the importance of it, where through this Jnana Yajna, you are worshipping. Yaja means to worship. Therefore, it says, Jnana Yajnena Chapyanye Yajanto Mamupasate. Now, coming to again Adi Shankara's commentary, he talks about three classes of persons. One is he who sees the unity in everything, ekatva. One sees unity in everything, and it is unity that he is referring to and or worshipping. Therefore, this in a way is the Upanishadic path, because the Upanishads talk only of Atman and Brahman. And the Brahman is something absolute, unmanifest, and cannot be conceived as anything. So Ekatva refers to that state of our worship where you are able to see the unity of that Supreme Being. Now the second one is Pruthaktva. Pruthak means separate or different. The word Pruthak means different, separate. The second class of people are those, they see it as Pruthaktva. They see that to be different. That means he is the Lord and I am seeing him as such, and I am his servant. So there, this aspect of duality is there. Then the third class, which he says is what is called as Bahudha Vishwatomukham. Bahudha Vishwatomukham is, you see that multidimensional aspect of it as multiplicity of it, and whatever you see, whatever you think, whatever you hear, whatever you say, everything is offered to that which is appearing in a millionfold. That is the Bahudha and Vishwatomukham. Vishwatomukham is, here it refers to being a face in all directions. The mukha or the face is turned in all directions. That means everything is in that. So this is the differentiation which Adi Shankara talks about. But when it comes to Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya, they don't consider these as three different classes. In fact, very interestingly, Bal Gangadhar Tilak's commentary is also a very important commentary. Bal Gangadhar Tilak says, Ekatva refers to Advaita, Pruthaktva refers to what he calls as Dvaita, no, not exactly Dvaita, he calls it as the second thing, the Pruthaktva is the Dvaita, and the Bahudha Vishwato Mukham as the Vishishta Advaita. So that classification is also given here. Okay. So the different kinds of interpretations are given, but Aurobindo goes into a slightly deeper level. And here, that's why he says, his innumerable visages, forms, forces, here, there, everywhere, timeless and in time, multiply multitudinously in endless aspects of the Godhead in beings without number, all his million universal phrases fronting us in the world and its creatures. That is the meaning he gives of Ekatvena, Pruthaktvena, Bahudha, Vishwatomukha. Is that innumerable faces, visages, and forces, forms, everything is included in that. And importantly, he also says that this knowledge becomes easily an adoration, a large devotion, a vast self-giving, an integral self-offering, because it is the knowledge of a spirit, the contact of a being, the embrace of a supreme and universal soul, which claims all that we are, even as it lavishes on us when we approach it all the treasures of its endless delight of existence. This is the beautiful explanation he gives here. He says it is easily converted into jnana, is converted into bhakti here, because here it is that adoration, it is that vast self-giving. This has to be understood in the sense that one supreme principle has taken it upon itself to manifest in millions and millions of ways. That is this self-giving. He has given himself, or if you are calling it as that supreme, without any gender, it means that supreme has divided itself into these innumerable forms through a process of self-giving, an integral self-offering. One would not like to, get divided as such, isn't it? We would always think in terms of integration and integral approach and things like that. Essentially, it is integrated and unity and one and absolute. But out of its great compassion and expression of love, which the whole manifestation is, it is that self-giving and self-offering, an integral self-offering. And it is appearing in this, in the whole universe. That is the aspect where Aurobindo is stressing that. That means it not only has that principle of unity and duality and diversity, but it has also got this aspect of multiplicity and multi-dimensional expression of that in all possible ways. Vishwato Mukham. See, there is an esoteric law. There is a law of manifestation and law of evolution, which says that anything that can manifest will manifest at some time or the other. Anything that manifests, it will manifest. There's no other this thing at all. It will definitely manifest and appear in that form. So it is progressive always. Something, new species come up, old species die. There are new varieties will come. Even if there is a 1 millionth chance of something manifesting, it will manifest at some point of the time or some point of time or the other. That is the Vishwatomukham here. He has given himself up so completely through what Aurobindo calls as self-giving and integral self-offering. So that principle we have to understand, and therefore I would say that here he is giving to us that deeper mystery of the evolution of life and form. The Raja Guhya, what is the royal mystery or royal secret? Is this of manifestation, of multiplicity. And that is something quite obvious because we can see it. We can see that happening, and we can find that that is how evolution proceeds. And it is through that sacrifice of knowledge, through the sacrifice of knowledge, Jnana Yajna, you worship him, and therefore you will be able to see that what we call as Ekatva, Pruthaktva, and Bahudha Vishwatomukha. The unity, the duality, and the multiplicity of beings. So this is the context in which this shloka is explained to us, where one has to perceive this not only the deeper unity, but also the apparent multiplicity, which is also an expression of that divine. Okay? Yeah. Aurobindo has actually taken 16th and 17th together, but I think we can do 16th also separately because 16th, 17th, 18th, they are continuous. We can take up the 16th one for further explanation. Here, the explanation in the 16th verse, what is being given is, if people are worshipping me in many ways, how is it that they are all worshipping you alone? That is the question in Arjuna's mind. You say that people are worshipping you in many ways. Does it also mean that they are all worshipping you only? Because that's what earlier he said also, that whoever worships in any form, in any way, ultimately it comes to me like all the rivers joining the ocean. So a further explanation of that is the 16th verse. Okay? Sumanji?
Yes.
Krishnapani ji,
Yeah.
upasate. That upasate thing, I would like a little bit of explanation on it.
We thought of that term upasana to be taken. Upasana is basically the idea of worshipping. Okay, but after we finish 16th, we'll have some time. I will explain to you later.
Okay. Okay.
Aham praturaham yagyah swadhaham aham aushadham अहमेवाज्यम् aham agniraham hutam.
I am the. Okay, read.
I am the sacrament, I the sacrifice, I the oblation, I the fuel herb, the mantra am I too the butter, I the fire, the offering am I.
Continue.
The way of works too turns into an adoration and a devotion of self-giving, because it is an entire sacrifice of all our will and its activities to the one Purushottama. The outward Vedic rite is a powerful symbol, but the real sacrifice is that inner oblation in which the divine all becomes himself, the ritual action, the sacrifice, and every single circumstance of the sacrifice. The divine inhabitant becomes himself the flame and the offering, because the flame is the Godward will, and that will is God himself within us. And the offering too is form and force of the constituent Godhead in our nature and being. All that has been received from him is given up to the service and the worship of its own reality, its own supreme truth and origin. The divine thinker becomes himself the sacred mantra. It is the light of his being that expresses itself in the thought-directed Godward and is effective in the revealing word of splendor that enshrines the thought's secret, and in the rhythm that repeats for man the rhythms of the eternal.
Hello. Unmute yourself, Binaji.
Yes, Krishnan, please read the.
Yeah, I have heard it. I've heard it.
Yeah.
Shall we proceed?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
See here, as I said, he is elaborating on the point that I am everything. I am everything. Aham kratuhu, aham yajnaha, swadha aham, aham aushadham, mantroham, ahame vajyam, aham agniraham hutam. He's saying everything is me. Aham kratuhu. Kratuhu means it's a particular form of a Vedic ritual. Kratu means a Vedic ritual. Kratu also means a noble ideation. A particular Vedic ritual is called as Kratu. So he says, I am that ritual. And I am the yajna. Yajna, there are different types of yajnas. There are some yajnas which are prescribed by the Smritis. That's why they are called as Smarta Yajna. That's what Adi Shankara refers to in his commentary. The yajnas are performed for specific purposes. You have a particular desire or a wish to be fulfilled, you perform a particular yajna. You want sovereignty, you perform the Ashwamedha yajna. You want progeny, you perform the Putra Kameshti yajna. There are yajnas like this prescribed for different purposes. The point that is driven here, by the time the Bhagavad Gita came into being and its prominence was established, by that time itself, the Upanishadic importance also was taken into consideration. The Upanishads, they are called as the Jnana Kanda, the portion of the Vedas which is related to that divine wisdom. The earlier part of the Vedas, they are referred to as the Karma Kanda. That means they are actions or karma to be performed and rituals for two purposes: for worldly pleasures and worldly desire fulfillment, and also for fulfillment of heavenly desires. That's why in one context in the Bhagavad Gita, it is very clearly mentioned that all rituals, they end up at the heaven level, and after the performer exhausts his good karma, he comes back into existence. He comes back onto the earth for again into this cycle. But that's not the case with the Jnana Yajna. There the whole purpose is to get out of this cycle, this vicious circle of birth and death. This compulsory, going around in circles. Aurobindo very clearly makes a mention right at the beginning that the outward Vedic rite is a powerful symbol. It's a symbolic thing. And it's a powerful symbol, effective for a slighter purpose. That means you want a worldly desire to be fulfilled. But the direction by its very nature is heavenward, is towards higher evolution. Though the purpose for which the immediate purpose could be a very selfish or a worldly purpose, but you are invoking the forces, you are invoking the divine forces, which will automatically take you heavenward. So that is the importance of it. That means you cannot totally give up these yajnas and kratus. They have their own place. It's not meant for all, but generally for a person in the world, living in this world, and especially a gruhastha, a person who is in that gruhastha ashrama, for him it is obligatory to perform certain yajnas. There are different dharmas for different ashramas and different varnas and all that. So in that context, he is talking about that. And he also gives the explanation. Aurobindo says, but the real sacrifice is that inner oblation in which the divine all becomes himself the ritual action. It's not only the outward performance of the Vedic rite, which is a powerful symbol, but the real sacrifice. What is the real sacrifice? The real sacrifice is the inner oblation offered in which the divine all becomes himself the ritual action. So both are to be considered here. You have to move from the outward to the inward, to the inner. You can't always remain at the outward level and performing yajnas only for fulfillment of worldly objectives and worldly desires. You have to see that divine presence in everything. The divine all is what Aurobindo refers to. And therefore he is talking about aham kratuhu, I am the kratu. I am that sacrifice. And aham yajnaha, I am the yajna. And there is a technical term here called as swadha. Aham swadha, he says. Now, swadha, all of us are, I think, familiar with the term swaha. Swaha is a term which is used while offering the oblation or the sacrificial material into the fire. You offer it, and every time you offer it, you say swaha. Now, there is a very interesting, there are some very interesting names for Agni. Agni is called Hutabhuk. Hutabhuk means one who eats or consumes what is offered in the fire. Hutam, what is referred to is that hutam, or what is the karma, the action of offering is also called as hutam, and the offering itself is also called hutam. So he is hutabhuk. That means he is the one who consumes whatever is offered as the sacrificial offering in the fire. Mr. Jain, Mr. J.B. Jain, could you please mute yourself? Could you please mute yourself? Mr. J.B. Jain, yeah, thank you. So that is one of the names, Hutabhuk. There is another name for Agni called Hutavaha. Hutavaha means he is the one who carries the offerings to the Devas through the means of fire. Whatever is offered in the fire, invoking a particular Devata, it is the duty of the Agni Devata to carry it to that respective Devata. That is another meaning, or name given to Agni, Hutavaha. Now, this is as far as offerings made to Devas. But there are prescribed yajnas which are to be performed for our ancestors, for our mains, the Pitru Devatas. Whenever you are offering something to the Pitru Devatas, then you don't use the term Swaha, but you use the term Swadha. So that is the difference. Swaha is the term used for offerings made into the fire, invoking a particular Devata and offering it to that Devata. But when you are invoking your own ancestors and your Pitru Devatas, then you use the term Swadha. So here he says, I am the Swadha. That means I am the one. If you are performing a Pitru Yajna, Pitru Karma, and one thing we have to remember, generally, I don't know how it has come into our cultural this thing, that Pitru Karma is not considered as auspicious, which is very wrong. The very wrong conception is there in the mind that Pitru Karma refers to something inauspicious. But the Vedas very clearly say that it is a very auspicious and obligatory sacrifice which has to be performed. Pitru Yajna, Pitru Karma is an auspicious thing. It is not an inauspicious thing at all. It is most auspicious because, and sometimes it is also referred to as Punya Karma, because that is what gives you merit. And that is very, very important. And the Upanishads also very clearly say, Deva Pitrukaryabhyam ma pramaditavyam, do not neglect your actions for the Devas and the Pitrus. Deva Pitrukarya. Both these things you should not neglect. That is the convocation address given in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Deva Pitrukaryabhyam na pramaditavyam. So that is very important. So it is not inauspicious. In fact, it is very auspicious, and that is what gives you merit, and that is what gives you worldly prosperity also. So therefore, he is using that term Swadha. And he is saying, Aham Aushadham. I am the herbs, all kinds of herbs, medicinal herbs and herbs which give us sustenance and food. They are called as Oshadhi or Aushadha. Aushadha is medicine also. The term Aushadha is used for medicine also. So medicines for us are all derived from herbs only. So all herbs, medicinal herbs, healing herbs, sustaining herbs, herbs that give us food, all that is also me. Aham Aushadham, he says. I am that Aushadha. Then he goes on to say, Aham mantra. I am the mantra. I am that sacred utterance. This mantra is also a healing power. Mantra heals the mental illnesses through repeated manana, through repetition. The word itself has a power. Without understanding the meaning, a repetition of a mantra, the vibration itself has a power, and it heals all kinds of mental anxieties and disturbances. See, bodily disease is called as vyadhi. Bodily disease is called as vyadhi. But mental illness is called as adhi. Adhi means manovyatha. That means that anxiety or depression or disturbance of the mind is called as adhi. Therefore, the mantras are both adhi vyadhiharam. They remove both adhi and vyadhi. And mantra has that power. And he says, I am that mantra. And on this, Aurobindo gives us a very good elaboration. He says, the divine thinker becomes himself the sacred mantra. It is the light of his being that expresses itself in the thought, directed Godward, and is effective in the revealing word of splendor that enshrines the thought's secret, and in the rhythm that repeats for man the rhythms of the eternal. Mantra is that's how it is a connecting link. It connects the man to the eternal. In the rhythm that repeats for man the rhythms of the eternal, he says. That is the mantra. Mantra comes from the term manana. Manana is to contemplate, to think deeply, and therefore he refers to as the divine thinker. The divine thinker becomes himself the sacred mantra. And it is the light of his being that expresses itself in the thought. And what is this thought? This thought directed Godward. And once it is directed Godward, it reveals itself the splendor that enshrines the thought's secret. The thought is that mantra. It will reveal that secret, and that splendor of that mantra will be revealed to us. And who is that? Lord Sri Krishna says that I am the mantra. I am the mantra. And ahameva ajyam. Ajya is that ghee that is offered into the sacrificial fire. I am that ghee that is being offered into the sacrificial fire, and I am the fire. And I am also the act of performing. I am the act of that yajna also. Therefore he says, Aham ajyam aham agnir aham hutam. I am the hutam. I am everything. I am the fire in which the offerings are placed, as well as the act of offering. All that is me. That is what he very clearly reveals. He is both the knowledge of the knowledge and the object of the knowledge. Aurobindo says, he is both the knowledge and the object of the knowledge. That is what has to be seen. In fact, he goes to the 17th verse. I think are we continuing with the 17th, or do we stop here?
Shumbanaji, I think because then we have time for questions on 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because 17th is a much more important verse which needs lot of explanation, which Aurobindo has given.
Okay.
Because the 17th refers to Omkara also.
Okay.
So this is the, as I said, the chapter, one has to bear in mind the name of the chapter always. Rajavidya Rajaguhya. He is revealing to us certain mysteries and secrets of this whole system of operation and how he pervades everything and heals everything. And everything that is offered, whether in a different way or in a multifold way, in a separate form or in the form of unity or whatever it is, whatever form it is offered, it will again come to me, he says. So everything comes to me because I am everything and I am in everything. Okay? Yes, please.
Did I do the 17th?
No, I think she said we will stop here. 17th will need further clarification. Where there is no hurry. We need not rush through these things. We need to understand the different aspects which Aurobindo Ghosh tries to bring in there.
Okay. So question. Anybody has questions? There was one question from Meena. Meena ji.
Yeah, Meena ji, can we take up that question? Okay, Meena ji had last time also asked for that this thing about upasana.
Upasana.
No, the term upasana, the derivative meaning of that word is to perform the act of worship. That is the derivative meaning. The actual meaning, if you take the etymological meaning of that word upasana, it means to sit very close to that object of worship. Upa means near. Asana comes from the term asa, which means to sit. In fact, the term Upanishad also comes from that upa ni sat. Upa means near. Ni means below. Sat means to sit. Upanishad means sitting near and below
The truth.
that truth, or the giver of the truth, who is called as the Guru. The idea of ni is to establish that relationship where one should not assume that one is on an equal footing with that truth or with that giver of the truth. A sense of humility is required, where you have to not only sit closer but also sit below, because that is what is understanding also. If you take the meaning under and standing, it means you are standing under that benediction. Then only you will be able to understand. Then only you will be able to understand. Understand in the sense, you will be able to grasp the true meaning of it when you stand under the benediction of that truth. So, upasana means that. Now, this upasana, there is another term which we usually use, which very commonly is upavasa also. Upavasa means fasting. The derivative meaning is fasting. But the literal meaning is living near the presence of that divinity. Living near the presence of that divinity. In order to live very close to that divinity, one needs to have a reasonable control over the senses and the body. Now, the body, even all these doctors and nutritionists and biologists, they will tell you, the moment you eat food, and especially when you eat something more than what is required, you feel sleepy. Why? because the whole blood from the brain rushes to the stomach because it has to perform digestive action. It has to perform that action of digestion. So the brain is deprived of blood and it becomes dull and it tends to go to sleep. And sleep is a representative, figurative representative of tamasic guna. Tamasa or indolence, inaction, sleep, sloth, all these things are tamasic aspects of it. Overeating is also a tamasic aspect. Eating more than required is also a tamasic action. So the idea is to eat as little as possible and always hold that divinity very close in your heart. That is the meaning of upavasa. That is the true meaning of upavasa. Fasting also is included in it. Fasting is a small part of it. You can't do fasting the whole day always thinking about what are all the things that they are going to make in the night for me to eat. No. That can't be your focus. Daytime you are fasting, but thinking of food is not fasting. Thinking of that divinity, holding it very close to oneself. So whether it is upavasa or upasana, the idea that is presented to us is the proximity to that divinity which one can attain. What is the proximity to that divinity one can attain? Such action is upasana and such living is upavasa. So that is what worshipping means. Worshipping means always holding dear, constantly. Not think of anything else, not do anything else. Whatever you think, whatever you do, whatever is the action that is performed is oriented towards that divinity which is closest to your heart. The presence of that divinity should be constantly felt and hold it in your consciousness. That is the meaning of upasana or upavasa. Anything
So can
else,
we
Meenaji?
Sir, I would like to know. I would
1
like
minute,
to know.
Madam. Manjulaji, 1 minute.
Yes.
Can you mute yourself for a minute?
Okay.
Let me finish with Meena Nirulaji's question. Yeah, Meenaji.
Can we say so it is a mental activity? It is not
Yeah, it is not exactly an activity as such. Meenaji, it is not actually an activity of the mind. It is it is a state of feeling the presence of that divinity in one's own consciousness. That is more important. And what you say is included in that. That means whatever action you do, whether mental or physical or emotional, whatever activity you do is directed towards the divinity. Is done for the divinity that is present in one's consciousness.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Manjulaji, please.
I just would like to know, sir, the word Vishwato Mukham.
Yeah.
The Purusha says that Sahasra Shirsha Purusha Sahasra. Yeah, same thing, sir. Sahasra.
Obviously, it is manifold. It is manifold. What you said is right. Sahasraksha, Sahasra, Sahasrapat, Sabhu. Yeah, Sahasra Sirsha Purusha. It means 1,000 heads and 1,000 hands and 1,000 legs and 1,000. It all refers to the same thing. 1,000 here is only meaning to many, multifold. That is the Vishwato Mukham is it is present in all directions. It is all inclusive and all pervasive. That is the meaning of Vishwato Mukham. As I said, Aurobindo has very clearly mentioned the nature of that. As to innumerable visages, forces, forms, here, there, everywhere, timelessly and in time, multiply multitudinously in endless aspects of his Godhead. That is the meaning of Vishwatomukham.
Vishwato. And Agni is also called as Purohitah.
Yeah,
Purohit.
that which is in front of you, that which is in front of you for your own good is Purohita.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, please. Any further questions? And there is some mention about in the chat. Girivala 14 kilometers in Tiruvannamalai is also Upavasana. Similarly, Parikrama of Kailasha. Yeah, all these things are performed with the idea of feeling the proximity to the divinity. They are not supposed to be performed mechanically. They are not supposed to be performed as a ritual, but with that great intensity and great devotion and adoration, and actually allowing the presence of the divinity to descend into you. That is the idea. Yes.
Okay. You talked about the principle of unity, duality, and multiplicity or diversity. So our process of evolution is when we can see that unity in all these diverse.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is why one of the commentaries calls those who see the multiplicity as prakritaha. Prakritaha means unrefined persons.
Okay.
Prakrita means unrefined. Samskrita means refined.
Okay. Okay.
So the language Sanskritam also means a refined language. Okay. Prakritam is the common, vernacular language. Is called as Prakritam in those days. Prakrita, and it's not a derogatory term. It is to be understood as something is unrefined and something is refined. That's all.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it is progressively evolving towards that.
Towards that. Okay.
Those who see that unity are called as Upanishadaha. Upanishadaha means those who follow the Upanishads. They see the unity of that Atman as the Parabrahman.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Any other questions? Yeah. I don't see anything on chat though. No, there's no chat.
Somebody, Mr. Bhaskar, has unmuted himself. Does he want to say something? I can see one Mr. Bhaskar.
There are a couple of questions from Ramachandran.
One I have already answered. The other one, he says, if Brahman wants to be many and enjoy himself, why should he make us suffer? Sir, I think there is this problem of understanding the purpose behind the whole scheme of manifestation and evolution. See, at our present state of consciousness and present state of mental activity, it is not possible to actually grasp the significance of manifestation per se. Right?
Yeah.
So that is one important aspect to be remembered, that that's why sometimes in the Upanishads and all, these are called as Ati Prashna. I think there was a discussion about this Ati Prashna also earlier. Asking a question beyond one's capability of understanding. Okay. So that is one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is actually we assume that an outside agency is causing us suffering. This assumption itself is a very fallacious and a very wrong assumption. No outside force, no outside influence is there, no outward source is there which actually causes us to suffer. It is we ourselves and our own ignorance about the reality which causes suffering. In fact, as I think I mentioned earlier also, even the Bible says the same thing. Jesus Christ says, ye suffer on account of your ignorance. You suffer on account of your ignorance only. That is the primordial factor. So the primordial factor of that ajnana has to be removed. Until one removes that ajnana, one does not come into that light of that jnana and illumination. And unless one comes to that stage, one does not understand the meaning and purpose of this manifestation. So one has to orient oneself for removing this ajnana. Ajnana, ignorance has to be, the veil of ignorance has to be rent asunder. You have to open it. Like what we do for the sunlight to come in. We have to remove the curtains. We have to remove the doors for the sunlight and the fresh air to come in. So similarly, what is important is that removing of that ajnana. So why we suffer? The question when you ask why somebody suffers, there is an implied mention as though somebody is causing suffering. As though somebody called as Brahman sitting somewhere is causing that suffering. No. He is beyond all these things. And in the manifestation, his immanence is felt so that you can connect to him through that immanence. Through the immanence of that Brahman in manifestation, one will come to the transcendence of that Brahman. That is what has to be realized. Otherwise, if there were to be no connection at all between manifestation and the Brahman, the unmanifest, there would be no possibility of reaching him at all or connecting to him at all. The immanence of that Brahman, that principle which is present in the whole of manifestation, that's what Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita when he says, I am this, I am that, I am that, I am everything. When he says, I am everything, he is asking you to see that divinity in everything you see in manifestation, so that if you hold on to that principle of divinity, then you will get connected to the transcendent aspect of that manifestation and beyond the manifestation. Okay, sir, Ramchandranji.
Thank you, Sarji.
Thank you. Any further questions? I think it's already 18:08.
Okay.
We have had our 1 hour session.
Yes.
And done 2 slokas. Okay.
Is there somebody that?
Yeah, please feel free if there is somebody who wants to ask any question. There is no bar on the type of question one wants to ask. It's only a participatory discussion for clarification purpose. And I keep telling people also, we are not assuming that I am sitting here to give all clarifications, because I myself am as ignorant as anybody else. There is no difference. We are all in the same boat. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we'll meet again next week.
Yeah.
And then we are going to take up sloka number 17 and 18.
Yeah, please, yeah, and you will be posting those details. And one request to all the participants is to kindly read the posts, because that commentary of Aurobindo is also given. And in that, if somebody reads it once or twice during this week, because it's only hardly 2 or 3 pages, it won't be beyond that. To read that, will become the basis for our discussion. And we will also talk about collateral issues related.
So for those who don't have the book, I will be posting it on the School of Ancient Wisdom group. I'll be posting the 2 pages that cover the 2 shlokas that we are going to do next week. All right. So that takes. The other thing is that before we start the Loka Samasta, which usually we end with that, Janki Ram wants us to say prayers today for the healing of her his friend's son who is suffering from acidity. So,
Janaki Ramji.
Sajani is there? Sajani?
Yeah, she's there.
Yes, Sajani, can you please say Loka Samasta for Janki Ram's friend's son who's suffering from chronic acidity? His name is Gaurav Naithani.
Okay,
Yeah.
and also people to send out energy to my friend who works with me in the bank, Aarti, who has COVID and is in hospital right now.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, so please let's do the Loka Samasta, everybody, with your, please mute the speakers are muted. Loka Samasta, Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta, Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta, Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu.
We look forward to seeing you all on Thursday for the usual Thursday satsang, then on Saturday for Saram, and then on Sunday for Tattva Bodha. So, and again the following Tuesday for the next 2 shlokas on the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you so much for being here. And with that, we can end. Sajani, do you want to say something?
I wanted to say on Thursday, our satsang, we have Sunaina Sood, who will be talking on creativity and spirituality.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And we look forward to seeing you again many times this week. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Krishna Paniji, thank you.
Thank you so much, Krishna Paniji, as usual.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how to do this.
It's little difficult. I'm not able to.
Next time.
I can hear them, I cannot see them. उस कोई बटन है जो मुझे नहीं करना आता.
Video of that.
मुझे नहीं पता. Motion detected. What is fast motion? I do not know.
That must be an ad.
X क्या है मुझे नहीं पता.